supervisors of Modoc, Lassen, Plymouth, and we included Sierra County because they do a lot of shared things with Plymouth. They're almost one and the same. And we would have, you know, whenever there was like a 5th Tuesday in the month, I'm just looking at the 14 calendar, but you know, that was a lot of times because none of us met on that particular Tuesday, and we would pick a location somewhere in one of the 4 counties. We'd actually have a joint board meeting, and we deal with regional issues like solid waste or whatever. And I would say what you're talking about in terms of geography, that would be a perfect. MoDOT may not be as interested in it, but it definitely would be if you're going to include, you know, eastern Plymouth County, so therefore Plymouth County. You probably need to also consider that part of Sierra Valley that's in Sierra County. So that would make a more of a service. And then you could easily, and we've had. It's been a few years, but we even had some joint meetings with the Washoe County Board where we invited their Board of Commissioners to sit down with and deal with joint issues. And at that time, they were interested in getting the Red Rock Road paved because they had a big development back there, and those folks, it was shorter for them to drive to 395 and come into Reno that way than to take, you know, Red Rock Road coming in the back way like that. But the problem was is the last half mile, 3/4 of a mile from the state line to 395 was in Lassen County. And it wasn't part of our county maintained road system, so there was no incentive for us to pave a road for them. And so they eventually, through those joint meetings, they came up with the money. They gave our road department the money to pave that road for them, and so we have an agreement like that. But those are things that you can do if you have a joint meeting. So maybe what you're proposing, that would be a way to move it forward in terms of whether the administrative staff are on board or not.
Right.
I would suggest, I think the joint meeting's a great idea, and there's a couple of other issues we might want to discuss with our neighboring counties, juvenile hall being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe some of the sage grouse things, and I understand that this is important, but I'm not exactly sure how urgent it is. If it could wait until perhaps March or something, that would probably give us enough time to schedule that.
It'll take your
It's
time.
gonna take every bit of that time to get to that point.
I think that would be a better forum to discuss it
Yeah.
rather than trying to
Well,
coordinate
April
beforehand.
actually has 5 Tuesdays. Is our
April?
next April, yeah. There's 5. I was just looking at trying to find February and March are just 4, but April has it.
So what do you envision, so we
People
send out a
in
letter of
July.
invitation and with the idea about centered around the base?
And I think the last couple of meetings have been held like over in Plymouth and whatever, so I think if we have a joint meeting like that, invite them to come here, or maybe even go down and have the meeting in, you know, Hurlong or somewhere down in South County.
Yeah, I think the first step would be to reach out with an invitation to the administrators in those counties, get some proposed dates and some proposed agenda items, because if we go to the trouble to have the meeting, I think we ought to discuss
Get it all.
as many
Yeah.
regional issues.
Oh,
as
yeah.
we can.
Shouldn't we try and get, you know, representatives there like Lamalfa?
Oh, yeah.
And they generally
Well, we
would,
can have
they
Emily
generally
and
would
Lamar
attend
for
those, yeah, they generally would attend those kind of meetings.
Well, when they had that base tour, Amity came in the store before he went on the tour, and I told him, look at the license plates on the vehicles out there. And when they came back from the tour, he goes, wow, you're right. So we have a real strong ally in him. So I think Larry's 100% right. We get Lassen and Amity involved in this effort.
So maybe we could, in a couple of weeks, have a look at review the invitational letter.
Yeah.
And see if the board could give their 2 cents worth.
I don't have my April calendar, what the date of the,
April 29th is the 5th Tuesday, so our meetings are the 8th, the 15th, and 22nd of April.
that would be the target date. Okay.
And maybe in the meantime, we could look up could you maybe go online and see, get the application or something for to join that?
Yes,
the
yes.
military?
Association of Defense Communities,
Yeah.
yes.
And we could put that on the future agenda to consider.
Yeah.
I actually have the paperwork.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Supervisor, for bringing that up. Does anybody have anything more to add on this item? Anything from the public? Okay, We'll move on to item H10.
Since I'm clairvoyant and I anticipated what Supervisor Chapman's
Well, I
report was
saw
gonna
it
be
on
today,
there because you
I
listed
placed this
and
on the-
railed about it like a week or two ago, if I recall, so.
The board, I understand it has given direction to move forward with moving the boardroom from here to downstairs in the annex building under the administrative offices, but I'm unclear as to specifically what that direction is, and that's what I'm asking.
Well, Mr. Chairman, since I was the one that has stimulated this discussion once again, and it wasn't something that was just solely myself, it's 2 years ago in the budget, we actually put funding in there to try to get, that space renovated along with, in anticipation, that was actually before the courts moved out, in anticipation of their, at that time, short move away. And then we had budget funds even in this budget supposedly was earmarked to work with Pete Heimwegner and with the staff to look at. Everybody keeps waiting for this Harry Munyon guy, and I would say get rid of Harry Munyon. This space needs type thing, you can look at, doing some sort of global space needs type thing. If you're gonna wait for that, you're not gonna get much done, I can guarantee it. And probably the last 2 or 3 conversations I had with Mr. Nichols, we talked about, not only the rest of the courthouse, the office spaces there that the departments are now readjusting and are gonna be hopefully moving into. I mean, we had close to 10,000 square feet or thereabouts when the court's vacated. Being reutilized. Now, that annex building was built in 1960, and from 1960 till about around 1987, I wasn't on the board at the time, the road department, the planning department, and the board occupied pretty much all the space on the bottom floor. The boardroom was on the south side of the building. The sheriff's department also had some space in on the backside because of the jail that was being utilized at the time. The road department bought this building, and when they did, they leased back to the general fund. I'm not sure if the general fund ever eventually bought their share, if we're still paying the lease, but the planning department obviously took what's upstairs and they created this space in here for the board chambers, and the purpose for that was the Justice Court, which became a municipal court and eventually became the second department, the Superior Court, was located in the courthouse basement in less than desirable conditions. And Steve Bradbury at that time, when he was elected judge in 1986, I believe, around that time, the Justice Court judge, he was anxious to get out of the basement. So with the board moving over here, obviously that opened up the opportunity for the court to relocate into the old board space. With the court relocating, like it was starting as early as 2002, 2003, the board then, and Andy Whiteman was the administrator at that time. We went through Kettleson in his years. The board would move back to its former space there in the annex. Now, in talking with Mr. Nichols, we were in San Jose, and we talked about some of the needs of staffing and otherwise. I mean, obviously he needs some office space to be able to put people if he hires them, or if he wants to relocate and rearrange the bureaucracy, take 1 or 2 people over here and stick them over there in his offices, there at the annex. The board did have offices here when they moved here. At one time they were over on this side, and then there was a couple over on that side. Eventually they moved them up here as they had other use. The CAO had the front corner space over there. That was where they operated for several years. But then when 221 South Route became available after the library was closed in 94, it was about 96, they remodeled, they moved everybody over there, so the board moved over, and we occupy now about 4 of the office space there in the building. And Marty was very blunt. He says, I need to have, if we're going to hire these people to give me some people to get stuff done, would you be willing to give up your office? And I said, absolutely. You could have it tomorrow if I knew we were going to have somebody in place who can actually follow through and make something happen. But I looked at him, I said, but dude, you're killing me. I mean, you got 10,000 square feet unutilized over here at Courthouse Square. If we would get the boardroom, which a year ago now, Marty was talking about getting some of the board to go with him and go tour and visit some other board chambers to kind of see how they are set up, to come up with some ideas for that space. I mean, if we'd had the board chambers reestablished there in the basement, there would be some, plenty of room to create some office space adjacent to the boardroom for the board members. You'd come in through that glass area that the court's built, come in through there. And not only would you have my office, but you could have like 3 others as well. I mean, the solution to the problem is like right there. You don't need to be asking me, would you be willing to give up your office? And to me, it's the fact that we haven't been able to get all those pieces put together. But I told Richard, if he didn't put it on the agenda, I was gonna bring it up and ask it to be put on the agenda, that we need to, at that time, we were hopeful to maybe get things rolling before the year was over with last year, with the idea would be in construction now. So maybe for our 150th anniversary for the county, maybe we could be moving into some board chambers. And there's enough space there on that south end. The room that the board had was kind of framed by the hallway that came down and the hallway that came out. Planning was to the north of that, and the office that Judge Sokol used for his chambers was actually the planning director's office. That was where Mark Totten operated for years before they moved over here. The sheriff had kind of that small part along the southwest corner, but I would say that we push everything back to have a corridor, kind of hallway in the back there, and pretty much you could open up, that whole space and create a room that would easily be 2.5 to 3 times the size of this room right here. So we could have the board dais, use that judge's chamber as maybe kind of like a small conference room, so when we are in closed session, instead of throwing everybody out and shutting the doors and trying to do it here, we would retire, go in and use the small conference room, so the room could then be occupied by the public, and then when we're done with our closed session, we come back in and do that. It'd be more secure. It could also be, as I think Richard actually suggested to me when we talked about it briefly, that that could be maybe where staff, instead of having them sitting in the audience waiting for their agenda item to come up, they could be sitting in there, have some computer access, so they could conduct business while they're waiting for their agenda item. With technology right now, you could put some monitors in there so they could be actually following the board meeting without being in the boardroom. And even in that glass area out there, you retain that. Initially we all thought, why are we doing that? But actually it's kind of nice to have. That could even be an overflow room, put a monitor there, so if we have a crowd that fills the room like we have on occasion, you could spill out into that area, have a monitor, the door is open, they could come in and out as you need people, but they could at least be part of the proceedings. In the old days, when the board met there, and I served in that boardroom from 77 till 85, prior to the move, if we had an overflow room, and occasionally we would, we had windows on the south and west, east side of the building. A lot of people stood out there. The windows were open. They could see in. You could even put some speakers if you had to, if the overflow room was not big enough. So you could easily accommodate, a lot of folks in that environment. But the bottom line is, we can sit here and talk about it all we want, but we need to finally get something going. And I'd like to see us make that a priority. It won't happen by April 1st, but sometime before this year is over, it'd be nice to renovate that space. Create something that's going to be accommodating to the public, get some new chairs. These chairs came out of that old board chamber when they moved here in '87. These are the same chairs that were in place in 1977 when I joined the board. I would say they probably date back to the early 1960s. So these chairs need to go to the museum. They're historic.
They're definitely made in the USA.
They're made in the USA. And the board chairs that came from the boardroom, from 1977, when they moved into this chambers, up until about 1998 or so, they were used in here. And Hughes de Martinville, your predecessor, was sitting here. That door was open, and the aluminum metal frame gave way, and because of the fatigue, it actually broke, and poor Mr. de Martinville rolled out into that adjoining room there. So that was what was the stimulus to get some new chairs. But the county has never been too spendy when it comes to, if you buy something, they're going to last for 50 years, and we definitely got our money's worth out of those chairs. But that's what we need to change, and I think to set a kind of a new tenor and so forth for our deliberations, I think it would be worthwhile doing it.
Yeah.
I want to make that a personal mission to see done.
Thank
And
you.
we got staff to do it.
Yeah, thank
And we
you.
got money in the budget.
I'd like to propose that we put this on the agenda for next week, that for our last item, we relocate we,
Walk through it?
the board go over there. We have a big easel with a big draft piece of paper, a proper tape roll measure, and we go over there and we spend an hour, and at the end of that hour, we go design it amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
And it'll be done next week, and there's no reason why we can't shoot for the anniversary date.
Yeah.
We get it done. Next week, we collectively come up with
Our plan.
one or two options.
You know, I would be totally in favor of that, because what I was fed back to me was some of the staff felt that the only one who really cared about, maybe some new board chambers was me. Maybe I was the only one, but I would like to demonstrate to the staff that it's all 5 of us. And when all 5 of us speak, it's something that needs to be taken in account.
There's no reason why we can't do it next week and have a pretty much a preliminary design.
And I'd like to add a little bit of that to that, Richard. I'd like to see a facilities plan for all our buildings. I mean, they're spread out all over the place, and as I was going through the buildings, I was looking at those things, and I had different ideas, and if I could see, a facilities plan, we have mental health over here, we have the,
Well,
Well, if.
that was the part of what I was asking, the courthouse square revitalization task force, what I see,
I think
we delegate, the mandate is in our county code that we expect the CAO, and that was put in back in the late 80s when the CAO's position was established and created. That one of the expectations, we have the CAO, prepare this kind of a plan, and there should be an active working group. I don't think too many CAOs have taken that too seriously. But as far as I'm concerned, we don't, if staff doesn't want to, follow through on that, we do have a plan, but I think it's kind of outmoded, and I don't think it has a long-range vision. I think that square, now that the courts have vacated and we eliminated the new old jail, we've opened up that platform there, we have a great opportunity of putting in a facility, a structure. It was 100 years ago this decade, it was back in the 19-teens, that the people sitting here, not this room, people sitting at this bench, saw the importance of it. That's how come we got, the old courthouse was built, replacing an old wooden one that dated back to the 1860s, which was totally inadequate. And they built what is now the old jail, and then they built the courthouse. The centennial for that building will be 1917. So those county fathers at that time, county leaders, had the forethought that basically has served this county for 100 years. And the question really comes down to is, in the time I've sat here over the years, it amazed me how little we've been interested in terms of contributing to what that future holds. And I think, if nothing else, one of the legacies that this board, and the board last year could have had, and the board before that could have had before them, that this board could have before the next one comes along and maybe takes up the challenge, is to do something that would provide for the space needs and the operations for the next 100 years of this county. It could be done there on that square, and we've got the money, for the most part, to do it. We don't even have to worry about going out and bonding ourselves. I mean, with the money that we have available sitting in different funds, I'm convinced we can fund a big part of it, self-fund a big part of it right off the bat. And what it would do is it would give us the space. If we were talking about upwards to 30,000 square feet being added to that square, with the courts not being there, we can go ahead, and a lot of these departments that are scattered all over the place can all be co-located in one location, not only for the convenience of staff, and do it in an energy efficient fashion, do it in an economic efficient fashion, but it would be efficient for the public who wants to access those services to be able to go from office to office and do that under cover. And it could be done in a very, I think, a very tasteful way, but not an extravagant. We're not talking about anything like what the courts built on the other end of town. And I've got stacks of reports and documents and schemes and ideas that could easily be implemented if we could just get a group of folks committed to make it happen. And I'm determined to do that. And I think a good start is like that. But that's your facilities committee. And then when you do that, you have your plan. And then as far as the satellite operations, how those are defined would feed in to that. But I think your core is to get that square renovated. I walked Kettleson through that years ago. I walked Tom Stone through it. I walked Marty Nichols through it. And I've walked going all the way back to Bixby. We used to fight with him over that. So time we get it done, I hope that the new guy will take it serious.
So we're gonna concentrate first on the new board chambers,
Yeah,
right?
do that next week, and before the year's over, if you have a task force, with some public at large as well as staff and key departments, and we get that commissioned in the next couple, 2-3 weeks. I think by the end of the year, they could come back with a kind of an amazing proposal that maybe could be realistic and cost-effective and affordable.
But as soon as we have the diagram of the new board chambers, we could start on that.
Well, we could, at that point, you have something you can figure out what kind of a bid you have to get for construction. But, you take somebody like Mr. Heimberger right there and clone him and, turn him loose and tell him, this is what we want to see done. It's, I think, a lot of things, and I think it should be technologically enhanced too, where we have, we got Jean and her group here videotaping. Why aren't we setting up the cameras and we're live streaming, live feeding, they're doing it in the Capitol, they do it in a lot of other counties. That's all part of those renovations. When it comes to the screen and projections and stuff, I mean, what we have over here does not work, but, a lot of councils and supervisors and even school boards, they'll have like the monitors, so what's being, projected up there for the public to see is also in front of go to the courtroom. I mean, the new courts figured out a way to do that, so each juror is looking at the screen as well as what's being put up there when they're having their trials. And all that could be done and done for, a small sum, in that location.
Okay.
Mr. Heimberger has a comment, but before he gets to that, I just wanted to address the Munyon contract, which the county entered into a contract with Munyon to do an overall plan. I think there's some value.
When did they enter into that contract?
I don't have a date.
Back when Kettleson was the administrator, so
Well,
that can give you, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know. But at any rate, part of the reason I understand that he hasn't completed that project is because he's waiting for information from the county. And so I'd like to figure that out, if it's us that's causing the delay or if it's he that's causing the delay, before we just discard that project, because I think we've already expended.
So he's had a
money.
contract for multiple years and he's waiting for the county. Why isn't he at the podium saying, hey, you guys hired me to do this. Obviously, it's not important to the people who are supposed to be providing this information.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I'm not interested in wasting any more time waiting for the departments involved and Mr. Munyon involved to get something done, because it's been clearly demonstrated to me that they're going to get nothing done. And I'm not going to sit here any longer for that.
I think next week will be.
Yeah.
We'll
Let's get started.
Okay, and then Pete,
Maybe
and then,
refreshing for the board.
Jean had her hand up a bit ago.
Oh, I as an attendee all these years would like to have a more comfortable chair to sit in. It's not just you gentlemen, it's all these people here too. And I'm sure Ruth would like a nice location as well.
Heated chair.
I can assure you, Gene, that if we can get something redesigned over there, we can get away from these 1960 chairs, and I feel the same way. The public is not well accommodated at our meetings. First of all, the size of this room and the amount of people we could accommodate is about a third less, about a half to two-thirds of what we had in the old board chambers. So we went down instead of up.
Pete?
To follow up on your comments regarding the board chambers specifically over there at Roof Street, the direction was out of, I think, the budget hearings there late or early fall, that there was something to be done. So there was, I believe, $20,000 budgeted in there. Following that, we did get an agreement put in place with NST to do preliminary
That's why we need bigger quarters.
preliminary conceptual drawings, as you just spoke about. One of them, and one of the important things was the technology of that, so that's addressed. So that agreement's in place, ready to go. Mr. Nichols has given 3 contacts to follow up with the newer board chambers down in the valley. I think maybe one's down in Red Bluff and another one in Ready. So I have those. So it was a matter of getting meetings scheduled with NST, with Mr. Morish, myself, and those folks to go down. With the Hurlong stuff, the holidays and everything, that did not happen last year. My intent is to get that done as soon as possible, go down and do the tour in a day. And it'd be great if you guys want to go over, I can see if Mr. Morish
I was
can.
going to say, could the NST guys join us next week
Absolutely.
after the meeting? So
And-
he can hear what we're all interested in,
Yeah.
and the public and everybody.
So what we're expecting him to do, his first part of his scope of work, is to do basically conceptual drawings, and it includes that whole space, the old courtroom and then the old area that the courts occupy. So he knows what he's dealing with there. And then come up with probable cost of construction. And then once we have that, then we can go forward on doing plan specs and so forth from there, so.
And start lining up the contractors that could do the parts that need to be done.
But at least next week, we could tell Jeff and see exactly what we want, the approximate size of the rooms, approximate.
Yeah, that would let, yeah, you'd definitely be able to start rolling on that part. We can go take a look at the technology stuff. That was one of the things we were just trying to get an idea for him on what's out there, because that's kind of something we're not real familiar with, because we don't, of course, don't have it here, so. And see what's the best way to set that up and for where it's beneficial to the public and the staff and so forth.
Thank you, Jeff, for bringing this up again, and I think it's gonna fast track now, so.
I think it'd be a good exercise for the board, maybe give us all a fresh start.
Okay, if there's nothing else to add, we'll move on to item H11, County Administrative Officer on the CAO recruitment.
What I did based on the board's direction last month was to simply provide the materials that were utilized last time in advertising the CAO position for your discussion. And, obviously the dates that are included in here are old and we can revise those. But I just wanted to get some direction and more specifically for Cheryl, who will probably be putting all this together, what the board wants to do, how they want to recruit. Cheryl did put together a spreadsheet on the back which kind of outlines some of the costs of the different advertising options. And that's it. Hopefully you've all had a chance to review the old one and maybe make some suggested changes.
I would like to suggest, that we gotta come up with a date, a deadline for the applications, maybe be in end of March. It seems that it's gonna be February before we know it.
Right. Just looking at the calendar, if we were to get something together and back to the board by the end of the month, maybe it'd be ready for release the 1st of February, maybe give 45 days or something like that. That'd be the middle of March.
We could try and cram it
Boy,
quicker.
that doesn't
but,
sound
I
good.
mean,
I would say rather than, we could, if we're gonna be looking at that, if we could get something to the agenda for the 28th, because we're already halfway through January, I would say the end of February would be the cutoff that I would recommend in terms of time frame. There's already, people know that, they've had this month in anticipation of what's coming up, so this idea that we're gonna get ultimately when we went through we went through 2 cycles when we finally hired, you got to Mr. Nichols, and it was, I guess it was the first time we did that. He was hired, he was actually offered the job during the first cycle, and then that fell through because of pay, couldn't get the pay squared away, so we went a second cycle and did that. We wound up interviewing like over 50 people.
I was just trying to get us some more free labor.
Well, yeah. But I'm
Month
saying,
worth of free labor there.
yeah, but I'm saying though, is if we cut off you're gonna spend the month of March doing the interviews, and even if you select somebody by the middle of March, they're gonna need to have time to relocate here, so the earliest you could maybe theoretically have somebody taking the job would be the 1st of April, on April Fool's Day, when we're 150 years of age as a county.
Yeah.
And so we're already getting a lot of free labor out of the guys, so, and I think that,
Not enough.
I'd like to set branding season as a deadline. New CAO.
So, I think that, if we
Yeah,
do
that
that, you
makes
might be,
sense.
because if you wait until the end of March, you're not gonna be seeing a new CAO till May or June.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how about
Any
the
suggestions, on the
flyer itself?
flyer, can we change anything?
There's no salaries, range specified.
The retirement will have to be updated, that will not apply to 2% 55.
Is that life insurance amount of 40K like standard?
Yes.
Yeah, what Cheryl's mentioning is that with the new pension reform, the 2 at 55 retirement formula wouldn't be available to someone who is not currently a PERS participant. So if we hired somebody from, who's not currently in the system or hasn't been in the system within 6 months, is that correct?
Yes.
Then they would go to the new formula, which would be 2 at 60? 63. So we'll have to.
So somebody from